So those are the 5 main points, and now we're going to build on those 5 main components of an abolitionist bill to answer common objections to bills of abolition. I'm going to go over the point again, and then I'm going to bring up the arguments that we hear from many politicians, both pro-life and pro-choice. So number one, as I said, abolitionist bills outlaw abortion from conception. Um, so we have to harp on the foundation that life begins at conception. Our starting point in communicating with legislators should begin with the fact that life begins at conception. God has told us this in his word in Psalm 127, 3 through 4, Psalm 139, 13, that he knit us together in the womb. Science has also confirmed that at the point of conception, a unique DNA fingerprint has been created, one that never existed before, one that is completely separate from the mother, right? So it is not her body, it is not her choice. Um, so with that, we need to let them know that if they agree that what is in the womb is a human being from conception, we can move on to our other argumentation for laws providing equal protection for the preborn. It is human at conception. This will be the foundation and starting point that we build on and that we consistently point them back to when we're bringing up other arguments. So keep that in mind. Abolitionist bills do not include any exceptions for abortion. So, one of the main arguments you're going to hear is, what about the life of the mother? The choice between the mother's life and the life of her child is a very serious issue. One that we need to point out is a situation that needs to be treated as important. In this situation, we need to remind legislators that the baby is a person from conception, and therefore we need to treat their life as equal to the life of the mom. In the situation of a life-threatening situation in pregnancy, we need to share the truth that this is a life-rescuing mission, not a case where we should just kill the child to rescue the mom. In a rescue operation, we need to treat the lives as equal and do whatever we need to do to protect both lives, both the mom and the baby. This type of care is done in a doctor's office. It is not done in an abortion clinic. Abortion clinics are not set up to save anyone. They are set up to murder human beings. Abortion clinics don't have the means to rescue the mother or the baby. A physician's goal should be to preserve as many lives as possible. If they can only save one, then he is obligated to save that life. This is completely different from the intentional taking of a life that occurs in an abortion. Many of the times, if the threat of the life as the mother has to do with an ectopic pregnancy in which the baby begins to develop outside of the womb, in this case, the mother should go to the hospital to help her and her baby because there is nothing that can be done in an abortion clinic. Abortion clinics do not have the means to help women and their baby in this situation. If the baby is in the fallopian tube developing, an abortion cannot be done in an abortion clinic. So anyone who says that they're going to an abortion clinic because they were diagnosed with a ectopic pregnancy is lying. There is nothing they can do there for them. For more information on this, for the details on it, you can search ectopic pregnancies by going to End Abortion Now and searching the materials there. Now, another common is rape. This is the most common objection to abortion. What we must remind legislators is that rape is a very serious issue, one that should be punished. The rapist should be punished, but who should not be punished is the child. We never punish the child for the sins of the father, right? We need to ask them and challenge them, well, which one is worse, murder or rape? Because if the mom goes through with murdering her child in an abortion, they're adding to the offenses. She was raped, and therefore, in turn, she is committing a murder in response. So the problem with murder, like rape, it is taking liberties with someone else's body that we have not been given permission to do. And we are actually, in murder, we're taking their life. And God sees both of these things, murder and rape, in being equally sinful. And he says that the punishment for both of them is death. So we need to remind our legislators that the answer to abortion is not murdering the child in response. The answer to rape is punishing the father. That is the answer. So, number 3, abolitionist bills criminalize abortion itself and establish equal justice for the preborn. What you'll hear from the pro-life movement and many pro-life legislators is punishing the mother is wrong. This objection has sadly been pressed by the pro-life industry. It falls under the assumption that the mother is the victim in abortion because she has no idea what she's doing in murdering her child. It states that the mother of the unborn child is just as much as a victim of abortion as her baby. But if we treat the mother as the second victim in abortion, we set ourselves in opposition to what God has said about equal justice. After all, do we truly believe that unborn children are human beings from conception? Right? So it's a human being from conception. If so, the mother must be considered the perpetrator of the crime rather than the victim. Any other conclusion would force us to discriminate between human beings on the basis of their age. If a pregnant woman were to kill another pregnant woman, she would be charged on with two counts of homicide, one for the mother and one for the baby. For this reason, it is only when a pregnant woman pays to have her own baby killed, um, when a woman pays to have her own baby killed, she should not be exempt from this charge. It should be just as if she had killed a pregnant woman. We need to remind our legislators that when we criminalize abortion, the woman who had abortion will not automatically be sentenced as a murderer. She will be given the right of due process, in which there will be an investigation, a court hearing, where she is innocent until proven guilty. She can also appeal any decision that's made to the court. The prosecution will also need to bring evidence against her. If she was forced to have an abortion, she will be protected under the law as well. Um, so she will have the full protection of the law, just as the baby would. So she will be given a fair trial. Evidence must be brought. There'll be a court case. She'll have the right to appeal, bring up witnesses. So we can't treat it as if, oh, she's had an abortion, she's automatically sentenced to death. That's not the way that this will work. Lastly, in this argument, what we need to focus on is when we focus on the idea that women are victims, that does not reflect the reality that we see when we are standing on the sidewalk in front of abortion clinics. So many of us have been involved in this fight to end abortion for many years, and I've been involved in it for about 4 years, and there have been more people who've been involved in it a lot longer than I have. If you've been out to the abortion mill for any length of time, you will see the truth that mothers and fathers know exactly what they're doing, and they want to do it. It's not about the education that they do or don't have. They know that they're going to kill a baby, and they do it anyways. And as Romans 1 tells us, God has handed them over to do what ought not to be done, to debase mind, where they become murderers, haters of God. And this is evidence of that. Mothers and fathers going in to kill their very own children. So, number 4, abolitionist bills do not submit to the unconstitutional ruling of Roe versus Wade. Under this headline, you'll see the argument that Legislators will say and try to get out of doing what's right by saying, oh, the court will just strike it down. The Supreme Court will strike down this bill if we put it in. So, an objection like this assumes a pragmatic approach to ending abortion. The reasoning goes something like this: opposing a bill of complete abolition will not work. The Supreme Court will reject it outright. The problem is that the Supreme Court is not God. Our motivation in ending abortion is not found in doing what works, but doing what is right before our God, right? He has told us clearly what he requires of us. We are to be faithful. We are to be consistent. We are to legislate consistently with our fundamental premise that life begins at conception. Most importantly, we are to obey and fear God rather than man, as it says in Acts 5:29. Obedience to God shows our love for him and our neighbor. John 14:15. God calls Christians to be faithful and obedient, not to merely do what we think will be successful. We must encourage our legislators and those in positions of authority to be courageous and uncompromising. The Word of God tells us what will happen if we are not faithful to remove the innocent bloodshed from among us in Deuteronomy 20:1-5. These verses tell us that God will not only set his judgment and wrath against both believers and non-believers, but he will set his judgment against our families. This should concern us. And if the legislator claims to be a person of faith, it should concern them. They have an incredibly limited amount of delegated authority given to them by the Constitution. They do so something to think about is that they are obligated by God as a person of faith if they are confessing faith in Christ, right? They must be faithful. There's the warnings in Deuteronomy 20:1-5. Also, the Supreme Court does not have the ability to create laws, and we'll look at that in the next argument. They have a very limited amount of power as given to them by the Constitution. They do not have the authority to limit states from outlawing abortion. It remains up to the state and the people, not the federal government, to establish justice for the preborn. The next point under abolitionist bills do not submit to the unconstitutional ruling of Roe versus Wade is the argument that we cannot defy the federal government because they think that Roe versus Wade is law. You will hear legislators in positions of creating legislation say that Roe versus Wade is law. Roe versus Wade is a Supreme Court ruling. It is not a law. We must remind them and tell them that the courts do not make laws. Legislators make laws. We must remind them of the power of the state sovereignty to ignore unjust federal rulings. A great example of this is what many states have done across the nation in the instance of legalizing marijuana. I'm not a supporter of this, but what I am going to say is if states can legalize marijuana, then they can deny the federal government on the issue of abortion. We need to tell our legislators, remind them of the states that have said no to the federal government so they can smoke pot, and remind them that we can do the exact same thing with ending abortion in our state. We also need to point out that Roe versus Wade is unconstitutional. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution states that all human beings must have equal protection under the law. At the time that Roe v. Wade was ruled on, Supreme Court Justice Blackmun wrote, "We need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins. When those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus. The judiciary at this point in development of man's knowledge is not in a position to speculate as to the answer. We know that this is false. We know a baby in the womb is human from conception. The Bible tells us, and science has confirmed it. Roe versus Wade's ruling was unconstitutional and morally wrong, and it should be ignored. And the fifth point is abolition bills repeal or supersede all statutes which allow for abortion. So a lot of the arguments you'll hear from legislators is if we put in a bill of abolition, it will do away with all the progress, all the incremental progress that they've done up until this point. So when we're speaking to legislators, it is important that we be sensitive on this issue. Some of the legislators have dedicated their lives to putting in bills like the heartbeat bill because they believe they are truly committing themselves to rescuing babies and abolishing abortion. They are taking an incremental approach, which we would disagree with, but they truly believe they are out to rescue babies. We should be willing to commend them on their commitment to save lives while at the same time pushing them to do what is right. If legislators object to supporting a bill to criminalize abortion, saying it would do away with what's already been done, we should point out that what has already been done is allowing abortion to continue and may actually keep abortion going. If the Supreme Court were to overturn Roe versus Wade today and make abortion, and the national government was to make abortion illegal, the incremental bills that have been accepted as law would allow babies to continue to be murdered because they have created bills that allow abortions in certain instances, certain cases like rape, incest, or the disability of the child. Any bill that allows a mother to kill her baby in certain cases is an iniquitous decree and needs to be done away with. We must be obedient to God in our legislation, and we must follow the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which states we must give all human beings equal protection under the law. Again, point them back to the fact that babies in the womb are human beings from the point of conception, and we must treat them as such. Another argument is that you'll hear from legislators is, well, if I'm not going to put in a bill of abolition because it'll just get shot down, I would rather save some than none. Many professing pro-life advocates and legislators will say it's better to save some rather than none. Their appeal is to a successful, foreseeable outcome rather than doing what is right and letting God work out the details of what happens. As I said earlier, Peter answered the rulers when that said he needs to stop preaching the gospel. He said, I must obey God rather than man. Acts 5:29. There is nothing honorable about making murder legal in some cases rather than others. There is nothing honorable about making a mother wait 72 hours before she can legally kill her child. Can you imagine saying sex trafficking was acceptable if you made people wait 72 hours? Could you imagine making rape legal if they used proper sanitary methods in the building it was taking place? Point out the inconsistencies in their thinking.
60 million murdered in our country, that's a scary count. Wombs become a death camp, trash can, a burial. American Holocaust, more than all the soldiers lost in every single war. It's an era marked in gold. The innocent, defenseless babies